Last week we gave our first impression of the all-new D-Max, and you can find a link to that video in the description below. Today we have the top of the range X-Terrain, and we're going to take it off the bitumen to see how it goes on the dirt. But first, let's take a quick look at the differences between the LSU we drove last week and this, the top of the range X-Terrain. The biggest difference on the outside is the coloured guard flares and matching coloured grille. It also has a nicely matched and sleek aero bar on the back with a roller tonneau cover. The tub also comes lined, but as we'd find out after our off-road trip, the roller cover and rear doors are not dustproof, and on a dusty road, your gear is going to need a clean once you reach your destination. There's also a walk-away door lock system with remote engine start and keyless start button. We didn't try the remote engine start, but it's probably a feature you'll only use on the hottest of days when you can start the car and the air conditioning before you get in. Under the bonnet, and just like the LSU we previously drove, the new engine in the D-Max is a 3-litre common rail direct fuel injected 4-cylinder intercooled turbo diesel. It has 140 kilowatts of power and 450 newton metres of torque, with maximum torque achieved at just 1600 RPM. The other big difference is the leather seats that are in this model, and, unlike the LSU, all the seat adjustments in this one are electric. The seating positioning and the seats themselves are nice and comfortable, and we really enjoyed driving this car on the bitumen. Just like the LSU we drove last week, the X-Terrain handles well and felt very stable pushing it through the corners. We're in a 6-speed auto, and from third gear up, the torque converter in the gearbox locks up to help with fuel economy. My first impressions of this ute was that it was quiet, with no noticeable vibrations. But now I've had an opportunity to take this on a longer drive, you can feel engine vibrations in certain rev ranges, and when you push the revs up higher, the engine noise is more noticeable than when we did our drive of the LSU around the Sydney suburbs. Cruising along on a country road in the X-Terrain is a pleasure, and with all the creature comforts in the cabin, it would be a great vehicle to take on a long trip. But let's turn off the bitumen and get on the dirt. For our off-road journey, we've come west of Sydney to the forest surrounding the Lost City. The recent bushfires wiped out a lot of this area, and quite a bit of the bush still suffering from the effects. The first thing I noticed when we hit the dirt was how stiff the suspension is. You tend to feel every bump in the road, and in some cases, we did experience a bit of bump steer. Now, we did have an empty load, and so you can expect the suspension to act differently once you throw some luggage and a bit of camping gear in the back of the ute. These vehicles are designed to carry a load, so it's not surprising they're not ideal empty. But we have driven other new utes that, in my opinion, are better in this area. There's a few things I really like about the four-wheel drive design elements on the new D-Max. One of them is the steel underbody protection with a sump guard and a transfer case guard that are a good size and well positioned to provide good protection. One of the things that always concerns me when testing any new car in the bush are side steps. The ones on the D-Max look great and match in well to the vehicle styling, but I was pleased to find that on our first track we were well clear of all the obstacles and not once did we scrape them. The ground clearance is a decent 240mm, which is more than similar utes in this category, and will clearly help keep the side steps in good condition. The front approach angle on the X-Terrain is 30.5 degrees, the ramp over angle is 23.8 degrees, and the departure angle is 24.2 degrees, which is comparable to most utes in this category. The hill start assist worked a treat when climbing up a few of the tracks, and we tried out the hill descent control, and it too was easy to use and kept the car at a nice even pace coming down the sections where we used it. Sometimes the hill descent in these cars can be a bit too fast, but the travel speed of the D-Max hill descent was okay for my liking. Traction control for off-roading has been standard in four-wheel drives for many years and is getting better all the time. And we found the traction control in the D-Max working well over the undulating ground and small rock climbs. It's not quite as good when it lifts a wheel and sometimes struggle to get forward momentum, and I think the traction control isn't as good as other cars I've driven off-road, including some much older four-wheel drives. But there is a rear diff lock, and when we had it engaged, it climbed up all of the obstacles with ease. The rear diff lock is also a standard feature on all of the four-wheel drive models in the range. Low range is easily selectable with the dial on the centre console, and this disengaged the traction control. You can go from 2 high to 4 high at speeds of up to 100 kilometres an hour, but as expected, you need to be stopped and in neutral or park to change into low range. With the diff lock on, the low range capability of the D-Max is very good, and we felt exceptionally comfortable over all of the ground that we covered in our short off-road drive. In this model, the wading depth is 800mm, which is a good depth for most four-wheel drive trips that the average family will do. We didn't get to drive it on a water crossing, but the specifications state that this wading depth is only applicable when the car is moving at 7 kilometres an hour or more. Otherwise, the depth is just 350mm. So this is something you need to consider if you decide to stop or if you get stuck in the middle of a river. As I mentioned earlier, this D-Max is a 6-speed auto, but there's also a 6-speed manual option. The auto gearing worked well off-road, but you can put it in manual mode to select the gears yourself if required. But for our whole off-road trip, we didn't feel the need to change into manual mode at all and left the electronics in the gearbox in charge of gear selection. For the final part of our short off-road adventure in the new D-Max, we found a few slippery areas with mud and a few small climbs to try out. The standard tyres on this model and across the four-wheel drive range is a highway terrain tread. Obviously, this isn't ideal for serious four-wheel driving, and if you're going to be going off-road often, your first purchase after buying a D-Max will probably be a decent set of all-terrain tyres. But we'll give this muddy section a bit of a run and we'll see how we go on the highway tread. Well, it managed to navigate the mud and the slippery surface quite well. We're in 4 high without the diff lock on, and this is where I noticed the traction control the most. I think there's some improvements that could be made in this area to help with wheel slippage. We've only had one day to drive the all-new D-Max X-Terrain off-road, but it felt very capable, comfortable and stable on the tracks we covered. The suspension on this ute is the only thing that I didn't like, but it's very similar in feel to one of the most popular utes on the market. In conclusion, the off-road capability of this four-wheel drive ute is very good and perfectly suited to most tracks and conditions that the average four-wheel driver is likely to tackle. So if you're looking for a four-wheel drive ute that is feature-rich, with an extensive list of safety systems, handles well and looks great, then you should definitely add the all-new D-Max to your test drive list. This video was produced in conjunction with Transport and Trucking Australia magazine and Truck and Bus TV.